I'm Dr. Harvey. Today I wanted to talk to you about using narrative agency to give students choices in the literature that they're experiencing in the English language arts classroom. In particular, I recently had my students play Detroit Become Human, which gave them more than enough chances to have their say in how the story goes. And if you're not familiar, Detroit Become Human is about three characters, and their journeys all kind of collide as they try and figure out who they are and how to solve their individual problems. But what's great about Detroit Become Human is that it gives the player the chance to change the direction of the game. Compared to traditional literature, where we have a very linear approach to the story from the author or the authority, the game gives players a chance to have an impact on the direction of the narrative. And that's great for empowering young learners to feel like they're involved in the story, even empathetically through the protagonist. They're able to act as a protagonist and do as they please rather than what the author intends. And so I think it's interesting. I think for the first time we see that game designers are creating these exploratory pathways for literature, and yet we don't see these literary choices in too many language arts classes. A good author can make you fall in love with the character, but I think as you play as a character in a game, it might lead you to building a different relationship. There's different things going on when you kill off a character because of your actions as a player. I think that's pretty significant. And we see this all the time in Old Yeller. You don't have to read ahead to the part where you end up taking your dog's life, but you do know that that is kind of the central theme of the book, is that your dog is going to be going away, and it's your choice as a reader to read through that part. Same with a video game like Wolfenstein 2, where at the beginning level, to indirectly characterize the protagonist, you're put through these situations as a kid where you're forced to do horrible things. One of them is to shoot your own dog. And you don't actually have to see what happens when you pull the trigger because the screen goes blank, but it makes the player make the choice to pull the trigger quite literally on their controller, making that decision, that commitment. And I think that's quite different when you're reading Old Yeller. You know, you are thinking, oh my gosh, this is horrible, and you read about, shooting the dog, but you don't pull the trigger. You might read about it, but it's your choice in the gaming space to actually make that move. And I think those are the small, subtle nuances that lead to us maybe being more engaged, being more immersed, feeling more bound to a character because of the fact that we had narrative agency and how that character's characteristics were kind of defined and built up. We pulled that trigger in the game. We walked in that room. Like, we made that happen. I think as a player, that's very powerful. Whereas if you're reading Old Yeller, you feel like you're being guided through the journey and you can empathize what it's like. But the amount of multimodality that is in the game compared to Old Yeller really speaks to the level of engagement and immersion and vividness that might happen in the digital narrative space versus the very traditional print-based one. So, as we talk about choices, especially in games, narrative-heavy games, I think it's important to think about the value of that transaction between what Rosenblatt would say, the reader and the poem and the text. I think there's a lot of meaning behind the interactions that kids have towards narrative-heavy games. It's interesting to watch kids bind to characters and to kind of see how they nurture that relationship or destroy it based on the individual person playing. So like with Detroit Become Human, there are over 40 different endings, and depending on your personality, it might go one way or the next. And that's even another thing when we're playing as a class and we all have to watch someone with one controller make a decision on behalf of the whole class. And there's more in that than, it's just exciting. So think about this as you pursue narrative agency, as you look into giving your students more of a hands-on approach towards their literacy engagement. Think about how they connect with the story.